Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Talk of the Town. My name is Tom Foster, and on the show we're going to be talking about all the positive things that are happening here in our wonderful town of Clinton. We're going to be talking to town managers, we're going to be talking about town councils, all the leaders in our town, as well as highlighting some of the events that are going on in our town. As a matter of fact, if you have any people in town you'd like us to interview, talk, interesting people that you work with or interact with, please let us know. And also, if there's events that you think are going on in town that we might want to cover, you can contact us at iris.dunham@clintonpublic.net. And we'll put that up on the screen later on in the show. But with me today, is, speaking of town leaders, is our town leader, Carl Kildoff, and he is our town manager. So Carl, welcome.
Thank you.
And Carl, so people can get to know you, tell us about your background and how you came about, but how you came to Clinton.
Sure. So pretty much my entire professional career has been evolved around public service, and I've filled this role in other communities. So after completing my master's work, I endured a trip out to Western Pennsylvania, served there for 4 years as a city manager for a fiscally distressed community. That provided me the opportunity to then come back to Connecticut, where I served as town manager in North Branford, and then from North Branford I moved on to Darien. So I've kind of done the bookend extremes of different communities, going from fiscal distress, former steel town, to well-heeled New York suburb down in Lower Fairfield County. So my career has evolved, and in the role I've seen in the public sector is that it's an opportunity to make improvements and an opportunity to make things better than how they were handed off to you. So that's really the motivation of what I take to this job of trying to fix problems, move forward, and find solutions. When Clinton came available as a community introducing the town manager role, that's sort of the ultimate in fixing problems and trying to move forward. When I was in Pennsylvania, I was only the second manager. So here, this is a professional opportunity to be the first manager, and it's a unique thing that not many managers can have on their resume of being the first. It's a little harder, but it's unique.
Now, where do you currently reside?
I reside in Trumbull, Connecticut.
Okay. Now, does that ever create a problem in terms of commuting and whatnot?
No. It's the few quiet times that I have when I
can reflect.
I can leave my family at home, drive here, which is not a burden, and clear my head and be prepared to focus on Clinton. And I've driven for all my jobs. This is actually a better commute for me than it was going down to Darien, which was arguably a miserable commute.
Yeah, I can imagine going against that New York traffic. What about family life?
Married, I have 2 children, 10 and 8, and very busy focusing on their soccer schedules and keeping them out of trouble.
That's great. Now, was it the job itself that drew you to Clinton, or what was there unique about Clinton that really drew you to this town?
Having worked in Connecticut and grown up in the state, you're kind of always interested in where you have your experience base. So the professional contacts that I've cultivated over 20 years was something that I thought I could bring to Clinton in order to help solve problems here. And being that first manager, being somebody that could then set a template going forward in this community. And that's sort of a professional challenge that is something that most managers think through at one point in their career.
Now, we talk town manager. What is the actual role of the town manager?
So town manager is the chief executive officer for the community. So the town council is elected by the public. They focus on policy and bigger picture issues. The manager is the individual who is hired by the council to do the day-to-day operations of the community, to depoliticize how decisions get made at the staff level, and help the council make good decisions and be sort of their advisor in chief, so that they can help focus on long-term issues instead of somebody who's maybe holds the office every 2 years. They just get in, they just learn it, they have to turn around and run for office again. You get some consistency across 2 years, a longer period of time with the manager, where the manager is seeing through multiple councils and can have the longer-term perspective of multi-year projects rather than something that may be more of a flash in the pan.
Now, how does this, you mentioned the fact that in the prior government or the prior function here in Clinton, it was an elected office, and of course you have turnover in elections. Yeah. How does the town manager really differ in how it compared to the selectman form of running the government?
The manager depoliticizes it.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of party, it's a matter of what's right for the community, what's appropriate by statute. What are the things that the council as a group comes up as decisions? So decision-making moves away from being the will of one, the one being the first selectman, to the consensus of the council. And then the consensus of the council helps give the manager direction so the manager can do things. There are other things that by professional training the manager knows how to do that maybe a well-intentioned individual is elected doesn't know how to do. So therefore you get a little bit more efficiency in how things can be done because you have somebody who knows what they're doing. There isn't a heavy reliance on outside consultants or legal services or the like. So you get more efficiency in the budget also.
Now, of course, town council is an elected office, and how do you interact with the town council?
So we meet twice a month, which is a little bit of a different pattern than what the Board of Selectmen was. The council fills the role of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. So they are that combined body. I attend their meetings, I answer their questions, I give them a regular update on things that I'm working on and then other things that they should be aware of. And if there are things that I need direction from, I need their input, I will bring that to them. If there's information they want from me, then I'm playing that role as chief advisor of this is how it should work, this is how it could work, to help the council move the community forward and make good decisions.
So how do they go about selecting you? What was the selection process like in looking for the candidate to become our town manager? How does that work within the council, and how does it ultimately shake out to be, Carl Kilduff?
I think here, this community chose to use an outside consultant to guide the community through a hiring process. So each headhunter consultant has a sort of a different rhythm that they use. The company that Clinton chose had a rather long process. As an applicant, I can say it was a long process. I think there was an attempt to get some community feedback. They wanted written documentation, they wanted a video presentation, which helped a committee narrow down the applicants that were provided to the council for ultimate interviewing. And then the council set aside time to interview those individuals and then made their individual judgment call.
And so you enter in a contract with the town. So how long does the contract last?
The contract lasts 3 years. The town charter limits the council to only offering 3-year terms. So we are still in that first 3-year cycle.
And when the contract is up, is it automatically renewed, or do you have to go before the council again and be voted again, or given a new contract?
Yeah, so we would have a conversation before the contract is up for mutual interest of continuing to serve, and then we would go from there.
Now, by charter, is there any limit on how many times that contract can be renewed?
No, it just sets the term to only be in 3-year cycles.
Now, you say you work with the town council very closely, and they, you meet with them twice a month. How many members are there in the town council?
There's 7 members on the town council. So you've got one individual is selected as the chair, another is selected as the vice chair, and then the rest round out the council. The chairman is just really the individual that runs the meeting. He has no extra vote or extra say compared to the rest of them. It's all about coming to consensus. So they are equals, they all have the right to vote, but it's not the will of one, it's
Right.
a consensus tool.
Is that why there's 7 members? I mean, in terms of if they have a specific thing they're going to vote upon? How does it come down in terms of political lines?
Well, it's like most things where you've got minority representation, so it can really only, the most you can have from one party is 4, and then you have 3 as rounding out what the minority position would be. Every town is a little different for whether it's a 7-member council or a 9-member council or a 5-member council. So that really is up to the nature of the community, the size of the community, the volunteer pool that's available to fill some of these roles. Is being a councilman is
a lot of work.
It's work.
Yeah.
And so I try to help them forge goals so that during their 2 years they can have a sense of satisfaction when they come off of council, that they know they've done something. And we try and find a way to work forward as a unit.
And most of these councilmen, they're volunteering their time, and they have full-time jobs beside.
Correct.
So I think what your ability as town manager to, like you said, depoliticize it is very important, because you're doing what's best for the town, not what's good for the party, correct?
Correct. And there's a lot of work that's involved in being a councilman, of having to study and be prepared for meetings and be prepared to make decisions. So when we're going through the budget like we are now, I've spent an inordinate amount of time going over it and understanding it to a fine degree of detail. The council, I don't expect, would need to do that, but they need to be available to go through the presentations, to hear what's in the budgets, and then make some decisions and set priorities for what things are going to get funded, what things aren't going to get funded, as we put together what is really just a spending plan and what the priorities are going to be. So they have to be invested in the process too. So it's not just the manager does it all. The council has to be a part of this process.
And do all of your decisions have to be approved by the council?
No, the manager has been given a certain level of authority in which he operates. And then if there are things that exceed that authority, that's usually a nexus back to the council for the council to provide direction.
Now, you mentioned the budget, and you're right in the middle of the budget process right now, and that's why I appreciate you taking this time to talk to us. Now, I think initially, was it February 3rd, you made a presentation to the council on your initial budget?
Correct.
And one of the things I noticed is that the town budget includes not only the town, but also the Board of Education. And so do you and Mary Ann O'Connell, do you get together and talk about that prior to this? How do you work as a unit when you're making that presentation?
Yeah, so Mary Ann and I have a good relationship, and that's another thing that's unique and interesting about Clinton, is that there is a nice transparency in terms of the big picture. That was an opportunity for me to craft my part of the budget, for Mary Ann to craft her part of the budget, and then ultimately I'm fusing it all together when I'm presenting it to the council to give them an idea of what the revenues are going to be, give them an idea of what the tax rate would be to support a certain level of investment in the community. Now, Mary Ann and I have good conversations about what should be in the budget, what shouldn't be in the budget. I only have the authority to cut their capital plan. The council has the authority to deal with their operating budget. But we're working as colleagues of what's a priority, what's not a priority. Can we fund it this way? Can we fund it some other way? So it's a constant back and forth, and we have that good dialogue that takes place between two professionals.
Okay. Now, what's the current budget right now? I know February 3rd you had a figure. Has the figure changed since February 3rd?
Right now it hasn't. We're still working through the process of educating the council on what is in the individual line items. I've telegraphed a couple of things that I thought could be reduced if that's how they wanted to proceed. I explained to them how I was proposing to finance a couple of other activities, which requires them to act separately. And we will continue that process into March. So in March will be the council would kind of take a final, not a final, but take their moment in order to influence the budget before it goes off to a public hearing. The problem with them having to act in March is that not all of the numbers are pinned down yet. So we're always trying to make sure we've got the tightest numbers possible when the council's putting it forward. So we'll wrap up their piece in March. Then we kind of put it on hold until the public hearing in April. We get public feedback in April. The council has another opportunity to make modifications based on the public hearing. I bring forward any changes that I've recommended to them where we've got better assumptions. Of late, the superintendent has also been flagging that. So we're in harmony on a couple of our insurance programs. So if it's a cut on the town side, it's also a cut on the Board of Ed side, for ultimately the referendum that the public will vote on.
So what's the current number right now that you're working for this fiscal year?
We're still at a $59 million amount, which is a combination of the Board of Ed, the town, debt service, and capital expenditures. So those are the main categories.
And how does it break down, basically?
Board of Education is the largest expense center because it is the largest organization in the town. Then the town is another chunk of that. Debt is the next largest piece of the pie. That's paying back all of the bonds that we issued for large projects. So when the town voted to do a bridge project and the town voted to do the new Morgan School, that approved bonding, which then turns into debt service. So for the average person, that's much like your mortgage.
Sure.
It's one of those must pays.
Right.
You all agreed to do it. We all agreed to buy this house, and so now we have to pay for that. So that's really what debt service is. And then capital brings up the rear, which is maintaining our assets keeping the community in good shape as much as possible, and really trying to figure out what makes sense to fund and what doesn't make sense to fund, and how we're going to fund it. So there's the most discussion seems to evolve around capital. Debt is something that it is what it is.
Yeah, sure.
So unless there's an opportunity to refinance debt, it's really pretty much it. We get the bill and we have to pay it.
Sure.
And then on the town side and the board ed side, it's really kind of operating expectations of what's going to be the service standard, how are we going to do certain things. So this budget revisits making the town planner a town employee rather than a contracted service. So that's sort of a change in delivery model. And it's also an opportunity to change how much attention we get to a 5-day-a-week person instead of a 1-day-a-week person. So there's a change in the budget, but along with it would be a change in expectations and a change in service standards.
Now, I believe I saw that it was a 2.8% increase over last year's fiscal budget?
2.28.
2.28. And what were some of the differences? You mentioned now there'll be a full-time town manager. What other expenditures were caused that to be that 2.28 increase?
So that's across the board, and I think it's important to understand that the total increase in expenditures is not what the tax increase comes out to.
Right.
So when the budget was projected out, at 2.28 is where we are at for an expenditure increase, but the actual increase in the mill rate is less than 1%.
Right. What was it, 1.9?
0.9.
Yeah,
So,
0.9. Yeah.
This follows the pattern of really focusing, at least under the budgets under this form of government, is focusing in on that mill rate and that levy that the ultimate taxpayer has to pay, of trying to keep that under control, provide some stability on that front. The expenditures are going to change and the percentages are going to go up and down. Debt service of late has flip-flopped between the Board of Ed paying, having an increase versus the Board of Ed having a decrease, and the town correspondingly mirroring what they're doing. And that's when we're refunding debt, that's constantly going to change the debate when we're talking about percentages.
Sure.
Like any entity, we have insurance costs that we have to carry, we have employee costs we have to carry, and right now, because of the current situation, we have commodity expenses we have to carry. So those things all fluctuate with the market, which causes some compression in the budget, but that's just the percentages on expenditures. You have to still keep the focus on the other half, the more important half, which is where's the mill rate going?
Right.
And what we've tried to do is get to a point of stability. I did give the council a historical snapshot of where the mill rate went, where it went up by 2% one year, and then it went up by 10% the following year.
Right.
That kind of whipsaw action is what we're trying to avoid here by having a longer term perspective, really kind of scrubbing to make sure we've got tight numbers and that we have an honest budget going forward. So there are things that we kind of have to do. This budget and the prior budget focused on a radio project for police and fire and public works. The town bought equipment. That equipment had a shelf life on it. We've now reached the end of the shelf life. The manufacturer is no longer servicing it. It's one of these things that we have to invest in. You can't kick the can down the road,
right.
Because the last thing we need is a radio failure when you're trying to dispatch somebody to a fire scene.
Absolutely.
So it's a must pay. It's a big number, and we're trying to pay for it over time in order to lessen the load so it doesn't hit all at once, and we can still keep operations going forward.
And I think from the taxpayer's perspective, I think I also read that for the average family, it'd be a $58 increase, average per family.
Correct.
So I mean, and as you said, there's a lot of things people don't understand, a lot of moving parts in this town that we have to account for.
Correct.
And I think, but I think to the bottom line for the person watching the show, $58 for the average.
Well, it's $58, and what I try to explain to the council is there's a certain increment of dollar that you have to cut. It's not just a matter of going and whacking $200 here and $200 there. If the council isn't cutting in increments of $17,000 in this particular budget, you're not impacting the mill rate. So you have to be focused on that, and it's really keeping the eyes on what makes significant sense and what makes the budget a reasonable spending plan versus a feel good. And we're trying to move beyond where the budget moves from being blood sport to something that's more operational.
And the other thing too is you mentioned just the goods. The cost of goods has gone up substantially. What about COVID? How has that impacted your long-term planning?
COVID has delayed some of the things that we wanted to do. It also accelerated some of the things we wanted to do. So whenever you have something like that happen, there's always the bad that you have to respond to. Constantly changing executive orders, no masks, yes masks.
Yeah, saw that coming in. Yeah.
Moving around with whatever we have to deal with, but there are also opportunities. So earlier, the electricity market was down. So that was an opportunity for me to move to buy electricity as a commodity for the town, lock in a low price for a number of years, which gives us some budget stability, which had I waited and done it now, a different marketplace. So if there were opportunities to extract some savings, operational efficiency, or re-examine how we do business, that's really what COVID did. That was a positive. So we're trying to move to an online platform for permitting in the building department and in land use. And then that gives us a solid foundation to build off and do other online permitting, which saves trips to town hall. And you can get better service, more like you would expect in the 21st century rather than circa 1950. So it had a COVID benefit by keeping people out of the building and not putting people at risk for spread, but it gives us operational efficiency. So that was one of the positives. The negatives, they are what they are. You have to deal with it. A certain number of people lost their lives due to COVID. Constantly changing directives was a frustration, but you have to deal with it. And now it's inflationary pressures on things that we need to operate and our ability to get stuff. Sure. I mean, the town is no different than an individual trying to get what they want. They want to buy a car. They're having problems at the dealership. That's no different than buying a police cruiser or having a specially made piece of fire apparatus. We're at the same pressure that the public is under.
Right. And Carl, as you look out to the future, obviously we all have goals that we set. As you look at the future, what are your goals and objectives over the next, say, 3 to 5 years for the town and for yourself?
Well, for myself, in the 3 to 5 year cycle, would be
you want to still be here.
a second contract.
Right.
I mean, as a professional point to focus on, and for continuity in the form of government, to have a second contract would reinforce that this is a good working system.
That's working.
Yep. And in order to get that, I think I have to show to the council that I'm doing things that are positive for the community. So. There's a number of things I'm trying to get moving. We did secure a state grant which provide for facade improvements in the downtown. So I've been able to write the grant, secure the grant, and now we're trying to move and rolling it out and getting businesses to improve the appearance of their business so we can be a competitive destination in the downtown. So that's really continuing to move something forward and taking advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. I've already saved the town a significant amount of money through reducing the need for outside legal counsel. We've secured a grant, cost savings that have been extracted out of the budget, as well as opportunities in the marketplace with electricity. We've done a number of things that have given the town a good bang for its buck. There's still work to be done, looking for other grant opportunities. We're trying to find partners that we can work with to address coastal resiliency. And we're working with the state and Ducks Unlimited on a grant to replace a bridge. And the angle for Ducks Unlimited is that if we improve the bridge, we can improve the habitat. So we're building partnerships that maybe haven't existed in town, trying to take advantages of opportunities to have a positive impact on Clinton. So in 5 years, hopefully we've had a success with our facade program. The dollars that we have from the federal government for stimulus, hopefully we'll be able to roll that out and have some good impact in the community and get some good mileage for making things happen in Clinton that are positive. And unfortunately, they don't get as much attention as they probably should.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the facade project, working in conjunction with the EDC. And how do you interact with the various, town heads of different town committees and things of that nature?
It depends on the committee.
Yeah.
So I probably have more interaction with the EDC. This is more of a back and forth in terms of where they should be headed and what role they can play to improve the local economy. Other boards like planning and zoning, they're separately elected. Right. So they're accountable to the taxpayer. And if there's a nexus, then we talk about where they can play a role. So we are in the process of doing an affordable housing plan, which we're required to do by state statute. I've asked them to participate in the process so that they have a say in what will be an important planning tool going forward. Other boards and commissions have a good back and forth with harbor management, but that's probably not the top of most people's minds.
Right. And do you see any unique challenges that are facing Clinton in the next couple of years that people might not even realize?
No, I think some of it is things you probably acknowledge if you're a coastal community, that you're always going to have some sort of issue to deal with for what is happening around us in our environment, what's going on in Long Island Sound, and how that translates into the biggest amenity that this town has to offer.
Absolutely.
So it's what are we doing on the coastal side of things? The upland side of Clinton going up towards Killingworth, there are a couple of areas of concern. We're always concerned about high water incidents and what that means for the Connecticut Water Company's dams and all the privately held dams. It's important to point out that the town doesn't control any of these dams. They're in the hands of other individuals. But when we have high water events, those become significant areas of concern for us for what that means. And then again, trying to engage partners for how we can figure some solutions out to take some pressure off of the public that live underneath those dams.
And one last thing, Carl, one of the things people say to me, I've got this problem, Tom, and I want to express to the people at Town Hall, and, where do I go? What do I do? If someone has a legitimate issue that they want to have discussed, how would they go about doing that? How would they gain access to you, or how would they gain access to the council? What would be the best process to follow?
We all have emails. I have the benefit of being in a fixed location, so you can come to Town Hall. You can send me an email, you can send us a letter. Depending on the issue, it may take a longer time in order to resolve it. I have a complaint that came in regarding some long-term issues that this individual has been dealing with, and it's something I can't resolve right this second, but we've been trying to work to dovetail it into some plans so that come this summer, when we're doing some additional work, we can now tack on solving that problem as part of that planned work. So it's trying to recognize the problem and then figure out what the solution is and put it into a schedule. There's a master email box for the town council. The public can access that and send messages to the council, and we've set up email boxes to receive comment on other matters like the budget. So when we had to have the COVID virtual budget approval process, we set up special email boxes for the public to send their comments to the town council, so that they would get, in lieu of somebody standing up at a meeting, they would have an email for how that individual felt about the budget.
Great. Well, Carl, thank you very much for taking time. I know you're in a very busy time schedule right now, but we really appreciate it. And hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, this has given you a new insight into the town manager, what the town manager does, how they interact with the various parties in this town, and we really appreciate that. And as I said at the beginning of the show, what we're trying to do here is to focus on all things positive. Interviewing town leaders like Carl. We'll also be talking to Chris Anaskovich, who's the chairman of the town council, get some insight from him, and other town leaders. But again, if you have any interest in that you'd like to see us cover, people, places, things, just let us know at iris.dunham@clintonpublic.net. So thank you very much for watching tonight's show. We appreciate that. And thank you very much, Carl, for your time and also answering our questions very thoroughly and very articulately. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.